SpongeBob SquarePants has brought joy to millions for over 2 decades. But there's one episode so universally despised that fans literally pretend it doesn't exist, and another that was so disturbing, it traumatized an entire generation of kids who are still talking about it today. But here's the thing, these aren't just bad episodes. These are episodes that fundamentally broke what made SpongeBob special in the first place. And when we get to number 1, you'll see an episode that's so hated, it has become the poster child for everything wrong with modern SpongeBob. But to understand how the show fell this far, we need to start with an episode that seems harmless enough, until you realize what it did to SpongeBob as a character. Episode number 5, The Splinter, Season 6. This episode starts innocently enough. SpongeBob gets a splinter at work and he's terrified that Mr. Krabs will send him home if he finds out. Sounds like classic SpongeBob logic, right? Well, what happens next is where things get absolutely disgusting. Instead of just removing the splinter like a normal person, SpongeBob decides to hide it. And Patrick, being the helpful friend he is, tries to remove it with a pair of tweezers. But here's where it gets gross, and I mean really gross. The splinter doesn't just come out, it gets infected. Badly. We're talking about pus, swelling, and the most nauseating close-up shots you've ever seen in a kid's show. The splinter grows into this massive, throbbing, infected mess that looks like something out of a medical horror documentary. But wait, it gets worse. Patrick's solution is to cover the infected splinter with garbage. Literal garbage. Banana peels, old food, trash. He just piles it on top of this already disgusting wound. The reason fans hate this episode so much is simple. It's just gross for the sake of being gross. There's no clever humor, no heart, no lesson learned. It's just 11 minutes of watching SpongeBob suffer through something that could have been solved in 30 seconds. And this is just the beginning of our countdown. Because if you think watching SpongeBob's infected splinter was uncomfortable, wait until you see what happens when the show decides to torture him psychologically instead of just physically. Episode number 4, House Fancy, Season 6. Now you might be wondering, how can an episode about Squidward's house be worse than infected body parts? Well, let me tell you about the most cringe-worthy 11 minutes in SpongeBob history. The episode starts with Squidward watching his favorite TV show, House Fancy, where they showcase beautiful homes. Squidward becomes obsessed with getting his house featured on the show, so he starts renovating like crazy. And here's where SpongeBob comes in to help. Everything SpongeBob touches turns into a disaster. The wallpaper gets ruined, furniture gets destroyed, and Squidward's house slowly falls apart. But the show keeps building toward this moment. And trust me, you'll know it when you see it. SpongeBob is trying to move Squidward's couch, and somehow, and I still don't understand the physics of this, Squidward's toenail gets caught under the couch. What happens next is the most disturbing scene in SpongeBob history. The toenail gets ripped clean off, and we see everything. The blood, Squidward screaming, the toenail just gone. It's graphic, it's painful to watch, and it serves absolutely no purpose other than to make viewers uncomfortable. But here's the kicker. After all this torture, after Squidward loses his toenail and his house is destroyed, the House Fancy crew shows up and loves the artistic destruction. Squidward gets what he wanted, but at what cost? This episode is hated because it represents everything wrong with Season 6 SpongeBob. The humor became mean-spirited, the violence became graphic, and characters suffered for no reason other than shock value. Episode number 3, A Pail for Gary, Season 7. The episode starts with SpongeBob feeling bad that Gary is lonely while he's at work. So far, so good. This sounds like classic SpongeBob caring about his pet. But then SpongeBob goes to the pet store and ignores every warning about a creature called Puffy Fluffy. The pet store owner literally tells him, "This creature is dangerous and will eat other pets." But SpongeBob, in a moment of character assassination that still makes fans angry, completely ignores this warning and buys Puffy Fluffy anyway. Here's where it gets infuriating. Puffy Fluffy immediately starts terrorizing Gary. And I mean terrorizing. This isn't playful pet rivalry. This is a monster trying to literally eat Gary alive. Gary is running for his life, hiding, clearly terrified and in danger. And what does SpongeBob do? He blames Gary every single time. When Gary tries to show SpongeBob that Puffy Fluffy is dangerous, SpongeBob scolds Gary for being mean to their new pet. But here's the moment that broke fans' hearts and made them hate this episode forever. Gary gets cornered by Puffy Fluffy, who transforms into this horrifying monster with razor-sharp teeth, ready to devour Gary. Gary is literally about to die, and SpongeBob walks in at the perfect moment to save him. Does he save Gary? Does he realize his mistake? No, he scolds Gary again for attacking Puffy Fluffy and walks away, leaving Gary to face this monster alone. The episode ends with Gary somehow surviving, but SpongeBob never learns his lesson, never apologizes, and never acknowledges that he nearly got his beloved pet killed through sheer stupidity and stubbornness. This episode is hated because it fundamentally breaks SpongeBob's character. The SpongeBob we know and love would never ignore his pet's suffering. He would never choose a new pet over Gary. And he would never be willfully ignorant when someone he loves is in danger. But if you think character assassination is bad, wait until you see our next episode, because it doesn't just ruin one character, it ruins the entire concept of friendship in the SpongeBob universe. And it does it in the most uncomfortable way possible. Episode number 2, One Course Meal, Season 7. Now we're getting into the episodes that fans don't just dislike, they actively pretend don't exist. And One Course Meal is the episode that made fans question whether the writers even understood what SpongeBob was supposed to be about. The episode starts with Plankton trying another scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Standard stuff, right? But then Mr. Krabs discovers that Plankton is afraid of whales. Specifically, he's terrified of Pearl. And this is where the episode takes a dark, disturbing turn. Instead of just using this knowledge to stop Plankton's schemes, Mr. Krabs decides to psychologically torture him. And I'm not exaggerating, this is genuine psychological warfare. Mr. Krabs starts dressing up as Pearl and terrorizing Plankton everywhere he goes. Plankton can't eat, can't sleep, can't leave his restaurant. Every time he steps outside, Mr. Krabs appears in a whale costume, sending Plankton into panic attacks. This goes on for days. Days! But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Plankton becomes so traumatized, so broken by this constant psychological torture, that he decides to end everything. We literally see Plankton lying in the middle of the road, waiting for a car to run him over. Let me repeat that. A SpongeBob episode showed a character attempting to unalive himself because of psychological torture. In a kids' show. And what's Mr. Krabs' reaction when he finds out? He laughs. He thinks it's funny that he drove someone to the brink of suicide. The character who's supposed to be greedy but ultimately harmless becomes a genuine sociopath. The episode tries to redeem itself at the end by having SpongeBob talk Plankton out of his suicide attempt, but the damage is done. We've seen Mr. Krabs torture someone to the point of mental breakdown, and we've seen him enjoy it. This episode is hated because it crosses lines that should never be crossed in a children's show. It deals with themes of psychological abuse, trauma, and suicide in the most tone-deaf way possible. It makes Mr. Krabs irredeemably evil and turns what should be a lighthearted rivalry into something genuinely disturbing. But as bad as One Course Meal is, it's not the most hated SpongeBob episode of all time. That dishonor belongs to an episode that didn't just cross the line, it obliterated it. An episode so universally despised that it has become synonymous with everything wrong with modern SpongeBob. Episode number 1, SpongeBob, You're Fired, Season 9. Here it is, the most hated SpongeBob episode of all time. The episode that has a 2.8 rating on IMDb and made fans question whether the show should have ended years earlier. And what makes this episode so universally despised isn't just that it's bad. It's that it represents the complete destruction of everything SpongeBob once stood for. The episode starts with Mr. Krabs firing SpongeBob to save a nickel. Yes, a nickel.
You're fired.
The character who's been loyal to the Krusty Krab for years, who's given his heart and soul to his job, gets fired over 5 cents. Already, this feels wrong. But then SpongeBob starts job hunting, and this is where the episode becomes truly painful to watch. Every restaurant he applies to hires him immediately because he's an amazing cook. They all want him, and SpongeBob is actually happy. He's discovering that he has value beyond the Krusty Krab. Sounds like it could be a good episode about self-worth and moving on, right? Wrong. Instead of letting SpongeBob grow as a character, instead of showing him that he deserves better than Mr. Krabs' treatment, the episode does something truly insulting. It makes SpongeBob fail at every other job through no fault of his own. then crawl back to Mr. Krabs begging for his old job back. But here's the worst part. When SpongeBob returns to the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs doesn't apologize. He doesn't acknowledge that firing SpongeBob was wrong. He doesn't even seem happy to have him back. SpongeBob just accepts his old job with lower pay and worse treatment than before. The episode ends with SpongeBob being grateful to work for someone who fired him over a nickel and would clearly do it again without hesitation. This episode is hated because it sends the most toxic message possible. That you should be grateful for abuse, that you don't deserve better treatment, and that loyalty means accepting whatever scraps your boss throws at you. It takes SpongeBob's optimism and turns it into something pathetic and self-destructive. But more than that, it represents the fundamental misunderstanding of what made SpongeBob special. The original show was about finding joy in simple things, about friendship, about staying positive in the face of adversity. SpongeBob, You're Fired is about accepting abuse and being grateful for it. This episode has a 2.8 rating because it doesn't just fail as entertainment, it fails as a moral lesson. It fails as character development, and it fails to understand what SpongeBob SquarePants was supposed to represent. Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more videos about how beloved shows lost their way, make sure to subscribe. Because trust me, SpongeBob isn't the only show that forgot what made it special in the first place. And whatever you do, don't go watch SpongeBob You're Fired after this video. You've been warned.